Welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of Touched by Horse. I'm your co-host, Chris Angel, and I'm here with your host today, Julie Meyers. Welcome back, Julie.
Hi, Chris. Thank you.
Good to see you again. Good to see you again. We had an awesome conversation last time, and on the heels of that, we had even more to say that we couldn't squeeze into 20 minutes or however long we were together about values. So I'm so curious. Tell me about values.
So values, they're relatively new to me personally. In my journey of life, I followed what others said I should do or what others said I shouldn't do. And I believe that because of that, I ended up in a place in life where I wasn't very happy. And I know in the last episode, I mentioned that after my sister died, somebody asked me, Julie, what do you want in life? And I said, I just want to be happy. And they asked me, what would that look like? What would make you happy? And I had no idea. And so in my journey, what I've learned is that by coming in touch with what my top values are, which are not easy to figure out. It seems like it would be, but they're really not.
Yeah.
Now when I make decisions, when I have a tough decision to make, or even a small decision, but especially the tougher decisions, I really go back to what is most important to me. And my top values are personal integrity, making a difference for animals, and kindness. So, in my life as a kid, I can remember things like a snail that had been stepped on, and I cried, and I got down and I put the snail in a little box and I buried it. And I stopped eating meat when I was 8 years old. And so animals have always been such a big part of my life, yet because I didn't feel good enough in math, I didn't go down the path of being a veterinarian. I did many other things. I always had pets, but I never incorporated animals in my life in terms of just the larger picture.
Yeah.
And now I get to. So stepping into what I'm doing now allows me to live within my values of making a difference for animals. A big part of why I came into this work initially wasn't necessarily to help people as much as it was to give horses a voice and to have people see their intrinsic value as healers and as so much more than just beasts of burden.
Right.
So values guide our life. They are what create where we end up in life. And those of us who come from families where, healthy parents, I think, really, really encourage kids to know who they are and to learn about themselves, not just to do what I say and live under my thumb. And so kids who grow up knowing what their values are, knowing what's important to them. And when I say values, I don't mean things like my family's important to me. Family's important to many people. It's more like, making a difference in life, connection, joy, professionalism, trust. And those all are great values that we all probably want, but only a few truly, truly, truly guide us. And values they're not the things that you learn along the way. They are intrinsic to each of us that we are born with. And that's why it takes a lot of exploration to figure out what our true values are. I had to go way back in my past and look at critical moments in my life where I felt totally in my truth, even as a child, to say, oh my gosh, that experience when I did X, Y, or Z, that really shows me who I am on the inside. Wow. And so now today that I'm aware of those values, when I make decisions based in those values, I don't feel questionable inside with myself. I'm not hanging on the shoulds of others. I'm moving forward in what's important to me. And it makes a huge difference in where I go.
Yeah. What do you feel like is the obstacle? I agree with you. I feel like for me, there's a lot of personal work that has to happen to really get to what your core or authentic values are. And until I got to those, it's a lot of just adopting the values that you hear are important. Like, oh, I value love, or I value family, so
Yeah.
what gets in the way of us finding or connecting to our values?
Well, from my own personal experience, I can say that growing up in an alcoholic home where there was a lot of rage,
Mm,
um, there was a lot of like, don't rock the boat, walking on eggshells.
mm,
My own authentic expression did not happen. And maybe it did in some avenues, it did when I was out with my horse, or it did maybe at school with my friends. But I learned to not be me.
mm,
And I learned to do what I was supposed to do,
mm,
and to be quiet. And, you know, I think that there's a saying, compare and despair. So the more I would compare myself to others,
mm,
whether it was for, I wish I had that car, or I wish I had that job, or I wish I was as thin as the
mm,
models on the front of the magazines.
mm.
I was hiding my true self for who I was.
Yeah.
The other thing is growing up in trauma of any form, whether it's, you know, there are tiny things that people might not think are trauma, but if it's something that affects a person on an internal level,
Mm,
from something small up to something horrendous,
mm.
trauma doesn't allow us to grow either, and know who we truly are. So many of us who come from traumatic backgrounds or have had traumatic experiences, especially in childhood, kind of grow up doing what everyone else thinks we should, and
Mm.
you know being afraid to be who we truly are, because then people won't like us.
Yes.
None of this is conscious. Most of it is
Right.
very unconscious.
Yeah. And the further, isn't it like, this feels true for me. You tell me, like the more we live life pushing it down,
Mm-hmm.
and the harder it is to know what we want, like what makes us happy. Like, what do you want to do? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And um, I know from my own experience growing up, um, you know, with the bigger traumatic experiences that I had, I was raped when I was 12, and then I was
Mm,
mercilessly bullied for it at
mm,
school. And so I would come home and I would binge. I
mm,
would hide in food, and I would stuff down all my feelings, and
mm,
I didn't feel any of what was going on.
mm,
Other people turn to alcohol or drugs
mhm,
or gambling or sex addiction or love addiction or porn addiction or whatever it may be. And I know for myself, I'm also the mother of a child who's in addiction,
mm,
and I have a lot of addiction in my family. And I'm a member of several different 12-step groups, and I work on my own issues there.
mm,
And what I've noticed with individuals that I know, and I have personal experience with people who've spent time in jail, spent time in prison, and there's a feeling of, oh my gosh, I have lost so much of my life. I've lost this many years
mm,
in my addiction.
mhm,
And when we're stuffing down our emotions and we're covering up the reality because it's too painful, um, food was not my problem. Food was my solution.
mm,
Drugs and alcohol are not someone's problem. They are actually the solution to
mm,
the buildup of painful emotions that we can't deal with, that often come from trauma.
mm,
And so people coming out of addiction, they oftentimes have no idea who they are. And so working on values,
mm,
really getting to know, okay, what are my top values,
mhm,
so that as I move through life and I make decisions as large or small as which elementary school to send my child to, or which college to go to, or who to marry. I mean, giant
yeah.
things that if we're not really connecting back to, okay, what's the most important thing to me, and
Mhm,
knowing that clearly, we end up going down these roads that are not, they're not congruent with who we are. And
Yeah.
we end up questioning later on, going, oh my gosh, how did I get here? Why am I here?
Oh, it's so powerful. I can see that all over the place. All the unhappiness. I mean, it said this way, when I think you're living life in alignment with your values, the things you value, you have a direct access to joy, to happiness. When you don't, you have to look for joy and happiness in other things that often don't have it because it's not the thing you value. Yes?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, when I started learning about this for myself, I just was blown away by the realization that
Mm,
I I ended up where I was in life based on the decisions that I had made.
mm,
Yes, I had traumatic experiences. Yes, there were times I was victimized, and I don't discount that. But as a 40-something-year-old woman, most of the decisions that I'd made were based on fear. They were based on,
mm,
um,
mhm,
you know,
mm,
everybody else not agreeing with what I'm doing, and this sense of shame in a lot of things. And you know, had I learned a different way, I wouldn't be who I am, and I have
mm,
no regrets, and I wouldn't change any of it. But I see so many people that I could help, and you know, parents parents want to do the best they can for their children. And so if I can support parents to support their children to know who they are and
mm,
grow up with a strong sense of self,
mm,
then joy in the family is going to become the norm. Um,
mm,
and as a teacher, I see so many instances where that's not happening,
mm,
not because the parents are intentionally doing anything wrong, but because they just don't know how, and they haven't figured out their values for themselves.
mm.
So my
Yeah.
goal is working with parents in order to support children.
Yeah, it's beautiful. How do I get a beautiful sense of what's possible living from a place of our values? And I also get the flip side of that, which is what is life like when we're not in touch with our values? But how bridge that for me? How do people start to access their true values?
You know, I think that pain is a great motivator.
Mm,
And so, you know, I could ask anybody watching this right now, what motivates you to wake up in the morning? What
mm,
motivates you to get out of bed and go to work?
mm,
Because you absolutely have to, because you've got to put food on the table, you've got to take care of your kids, you've got to pay those medical bills. So is it dread that's causing you to drag
mm,
yourself out of bed?
mhm,
Or do you wake up excited to go to work because it's something totally in line with your values, and you
mm,
feel congruent in your body, your mind is happy, your heart is happy, and you get out of bed like, oh, cool, I get to go to work today.
mm,
You
mm,
know, and so I think that what motivates us, or the question that you asked, where's the bridge,
mhm.
is when you reach enough pain and well, for me personally, that's what
Yeah,
I went through, you know,
yeah, I get that.
and questioning myself, like
Mhm,
waking up and going, okay, I am really not happy with what
mm,
I'm doing.
mm,
And what is the next chapter of my life going to be?
mm, mm.
And I have a choice in this. You know, everybody in my family lives into their late 90s.
Hmm,
So for me today, I'm 49.
mhm.
I'm only possibly, if I live as long as everybody else in my family, I'm only halfway through my life.
Wow.
So what do I want the rest of my life to be?
Mm,
I have a choice. I
mm,
get to choose. Okay, I'm going to move forward in joy and have joy be my goal. And I'm going to learn as much as I can about myself so that I make decisions that are congruent with me, and so I can be happy,
mm,
or I can just continue on this
mm,
road that is
mm.
really not that exciting.
Yeah. When you get to that place of, I don't want to live like this anymore, I want something that feels more true. And I know obviously there's way more to this than can happen in a couple minutes in a conversation, but what are some of the high notes for finding a value? So let's say I want to live my life in joy,
Mhm.
but there are like just a handful, 2, 3, 5 values um, that I was born with. How do I find that? How do I access that?
Well, this is actually where the horses come in so
Mm,
beautifully.
mm,
When I first started doing this work, because I had had my physical boundaries crossed and my sexual boundaries crossed,
mm,
the thing I desired the most was to have trust in people and to be able to have trust in relationships. And what I learned is that trust is so foreign to me that it can't possibly be one of my values because it's not intrinsic within me. And when I go in with a horse, or when I have a client go in with a horse, and we're, the client's saying what they think their first 5 top values are. We'll give them, they'll maybe come up with 10 words, connection, joy, love, responsibility, whatever it may be. And then they go in with the horse and it's like, okay, what 2 do you feel the strongest with right now? And maybe they'll say, okay, responsibility and joy. And then they're walking and it's like, okay, speak about responsibility. How has that shown up in your life since you were a child? And they'll be speaking about it. And the horse may turn around and go the other direction. They speak about joy, and maybe joy has never really been there. It's a desire, but the horse comes up close because horses know when what's in our heart and our mind are congruent. And, some of the words are really tricky, some values like responsibility, because for me and for many people I know and who I've worked with, they might say, well, responsibility is one of my top values. I've always been so responsible my whole life. Well, if you look at their history and you look at the kind of family they grew up in, maybe they had to be responsible because maybe mom was drunk and they had to take care of the kids, something like that. And so responsibility is more a muscle that they have developed.
Yeah.
And they'd actually kind of like to shed it to some extent.
Yeah.
Their truth
So
is
good,
more like, you know what, my truth is more around joy. I'm going to step into joy. So it's really figuring out what the truth is.
Yeah.
And the horses are master detectors at what is truly inside of us.
It's so powerful. I love this because it's so good, because I feel like people, you're right. Like the whole values thing as an adult becomes this wordsmithing exercise. And then we look at like this evidence we've gathered over our life of like, well, I'm always responsible. And so I value being responsible or responsibility. When in reality, like you said, that's a learned behavior over time because you had to be, not because it's what you actually value.
Yeah, and finding our top values is not easy. It takes a lot of exploration. It takes a lot of work. And that's where as a coach, I can really help somebody. And the horses can too. And, in my own journey of figuring this out, I remembered back to really specific incidences as a kid where, my friends were doing things like cutting the roses in the neighbor's yard to make bouquets for our mothers. And I remember feeling so awful inside and rotten. And I didn't participate. I didn't step into the woman's yard. I didn't give my mom any of those roses. I felt so yucky inside. And so that was a memory that a coach helped me find and go, wow, that's personal integrity. And I found several other moments like that. So it's really sifting through and looking through your history to these critical moments of either intense sweetness or intense pain, and looking at what was my reaction here. And that really helped me get clear on what my top values were.
That's amazing. I can see how powerful that would be, not only having a coach who, I think it's important that somebody who has walked through that shadow to see what worked and didn't work, guiding somebody else who's trying to find values, as well as the partnering with a horse that can also be a mirror or reflecting back whether that's authentically true or not, would get you there so much faster. I think a lot of people sort of tiptoe their way through it. You could journal your brains out and still have a hard time accessing what it is if you don't have a guide and something like a horse to partner with.
And that's what's so great about Gestalt, because Gestalt is experiential. So, I can take a client back to some of these memories and help them to feel it in their body. A big part of what I've learned about Gestalt is the somatic experience of events in the body. And so the more powerful events, they're still in our cells, and we remember them. Our cells remember them.
Mm.
And we can, I have ways that those of us who've trained with Touched by a Horse, or maybe some other somatic training, have ways to really go back in and access those.
Wow.
And so the stronger memories really, really help us to figure out our values.
Yeah. Wow. So powerful. I feel like this is such important work. I love that everybody Touched by a Horse is bringing important distinctions for people to access. But I love this conversation with you and values. We haven't had a conversation around values like this yet. And I feel like, I don't want to overstate it, but I feel like when you find values, you just unlock a whole new possibility for what's in your life,
Yes, absolutely. And all of the training that I've done, there's nothing that I do with a client that I haven't gone through myself, that I haven't learned on the personal level in order to understand it, inside my body, so that I can then take a client through it. And yeah, it's changed my life. It really has. And, the clients that are coming to me most tend to be women who are aware of incest and sexual trauma in their childhood. And starting there, working through the trauma, working through, discussions with perpetrators, discussions with people who should have been there and weren't, maybe, or many different things. It's like, what's next? So then we work on values. Who are you? Who do you want to be? Values set the direction of our life. And we have a choice as to making decisions based on what's congruent for us inside of our bodies and inside of ourselves, or decisions, basing it on someone else's expectations of us or what they think we should do. And it's a choice. And so I invite anybody to step into making the choice that's congruent for them to find happiness.
It's perfect. If people want to make that choice with you, they want to work with you, this has been an amazing conversation. If people want to take this to the next level, how do people reach out to you and work with you?
I can be reached at julie@serenityhorsecoaching.com, or you can just go to my website, www.serenityhorsecoaching.com.
Beautiful. Julie, great conversation today. Thank you so much. I love this about values. Like, I had some major ahas. Now I get to go capture those really quick before they float away and do my own work on that. But thank you so much for this conversation. Until next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chris.